everybody, and welcome back to Nubeva's channel. We're, of course, sitting here once again with Randy, and today we want to dive into a very excellent question we had received. So, Randy, first and foremost, how are you doing today?
Absolutely great. Last week, as you know, I'm a Real Madrid soccer fan, and we beat our rivals, Barcelona, 3-2 in overtime. So it was quite exciting and fantastic. So I feel great.
Congratulations, Randy. Glad to hear it.
Thank you.
Diving in this question, like I said, it's a very interesting, very technical, but what they're putting forward is that you guys capture the symmetric key used for encryption by hooking onto processes and watching for calls to different crypto libraries. But what they're saying is that ransomware companies can simply call an unhooking function, and then you're unable to capture that symmetric key. That's only going to take roughly 30 lines of code in C. So basically what they're inferring is that you guys might see some success with this at first, but the only reason ransomware companies haven't changed this because they had no reason to. So that success will taper off relatively quickly, and they don't think you'll be able to get it back.
Excellent points. And I want to mention that not only did I don't know where these was posted, but I received these questions sent to me. These are all excellent questions and points of view. I'm going to address them one at a time. At the same time, I want to mention that this person also talks about the fact that I was addressing a different set of questions from Security Now on a podcast and gave me credit to say that certain questions that I'm addressing is within the context of what I was actually talking about. So I'm going to start off right here with the question that he asked. I know that later on he was probably inferring something else. Okay, so I'm going to address the question first, and then I'm going to go into what I think he was thinking about or talking about. Okay, so first off, I think this is pretty well covered by now in our website and our papers and videos. We do not actually hook into crypto libraries. This is a very important concept. So the days of using ransomware with a crypto library, I talked about this a couple of videos ago, I think, or 3 of them ago. Ransomware really has absolutely taken off in the last 2 years. Since there's been cryptocurrency, the way to receive money from bad actors has just they've been able to monetize this market through the roof. And so they have a lot more resources. Where I'm going with this is ransomware and malware people have understood for a while that if they use a crypto library, that they could get caught, or it could be slower, or there's a lot of functionality that a crypto library would not offer them. Okay? So first off, we do function when a system, an application does not use a crypto library. They do not use OpenSSL or S-channel, et cetera. So case in point examples, even in our TLS offering that's out there with over 100,000 systems already running. For example, if you look at Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge, they do not use, Microsoft Edge does not use the S-channel library, for example. So we've been able to actually get the keys from systems that actually essentially ship their own cryptography instead of actually using a library. And he does talk about that later on. So I think as he was addressing, I'm trying to address the questions as they're presenting to me. But at the same time, I don't think he meant to say it in the way that was, but I do want to address the question head on, and at the same time, potentially make educated guesses as to where he was going. Okay, and so then he makes the claim that a lot of the ransomware could actually, if we were doing hooking, they could actually unhook us. So let me address it in a different way. I'm not dodging the question. Later on, he talks about, are we dodging the question, or are we talking about the podcast? He gave me credit that later on he understood that I was addressing a podcast with a set of specific questions and not dodging a specific question that I was being asked. I'm being asked a specific question here, and I promise I will address them head on. Okay. So number one, we do not hook into crypto libraries. Number two, it talks about the fact that ransomware simply could actually use 30 lines of code to unhook. I do not know if it's 30 lines of code. I do agree with him that if somebody were to hook into a process, finding a way to unhook it or not be affected by the hooking is fairly trivial. Okay, the statement of ransomware simply hasn't got to the point of doing so. I like to point out, we announced, I want to say a month and a half ago, that we support many different ransomware families and tested on them, and specifically one of them that we talked about is Conti. Conti will actually unhook everything that hooks it. As the person later on points out, there's actually a number of different malware and ransomware that will actually unhook different EDRs, XDRs out there. And so this is why I want to make sure I'm giving him credit that later on he did seem to address that point in a different manner, which is, I think the first set of questions talks about how ransomware simply hasn't done this quote unquote mitigating method because they don't know about Nubeva. We're a startup. They have no reason to address us. And so they're addressing Microsoft Windows Defender or EDRs or XDRs or you name it. Okay. But later on, he actually, I think, addresses that in a different way, or maybe he realized that, or maybe it's just a question set on a different context. I want to make sure I provide as much credit as I can to this person, because the things that he wrote, for the most part, outside of what he was analyzing about us, is actually fairly accurate. Okay, so there is ransomware today out there, a number of different ransomware that will unhook everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, having said that, the implication that he tried to say that if they unhook everything, well, there wouldn't be anybody who uses hooking like an XDR, EDR would be able to see it. That's also not accurate. Think about this, right? So if I want to make sure I'm not speaking about Nubeva right now. I want to talk about the technology of hooking and unhooking and finding malware. Mm-hmm. In my experience, an EDR out there that there's a number of EDRs that are wildly successful. I mean, just their stock market cap has been through the roof in the billions right now. And so what they do is they will hook into a process. If a process unhooks it, well, they immediately know somebody in that process unhooked it. It's not, just like he was indicating, it's not hard to unhook somebody that hooked in. Well, at the same time, if you're doing the hooking and you put in some code that runs inside another process, well, you can certainly do something in the thing that you put in there to tell you if it was running already. And if it's not running, well, they know this process is unhooking. And if a process unhooks, well, that is a massive indicator of potential compromise, right? So that is an IOC. People will know, wait a minute, applications generally don't unhook. Why did what we just put in for hooking purpose get unhooked? Okay, so I wanted to point out that even though there are certainly some ransomware out there and malware that will unhook, there's a number of them that do not unhook simply because they realize that the act of unhooking is in itself a way to actually stand out. Okay, and so I want to address that. I want to make sure. I think he asked a question and then later on realized the question that was asked may not be technically from a thoroughness standpoint accurate. And I get that, right? I'm addressing a question here that if you construe it in a different context might actually sound like something else. Okay? And later on, I think the setup, I'm just going to continue with the set of questions because this is fairly technical. He talks about how certain ransomware will use AES without Windows library. Some of them use Cha-Cha. They'll use ECDH with the asymmetric encryption to then encrypt the cell site keys, et cetera. That is absolutely 100% accurate. In fact, some of the times in some of my videos, I also go over that. Okay, so all the different families of ransomware that he talks about, that is absolutely accurate. I think what happened was he was addressing something that he heard me address a podcast set of questions from Security Now, and he thought that I was claiming that ransomware is only done in Cha-Cha. It was not. I was trying to address the question that this other Security Now had, talking about crypto libraries using AES as channel, et cetera. And I said, that hasn't been the case in a long, long time. Not only ransomware, but browsers, right? Chrome or on your phone, when you go to a website, most of the Google sites that you actually look into, like Google Drive, Google Docs, et cetera, they're all using Cha-Cha. They are not using AES. That was the context in which I was addressing that context, in which he then responded to what he heard on my video and said that, as he's correctly pointed out, AES is not the only encryption. It's Cha-Cha, it's many other ways. And on the asymmetric side, a lot of malwares and ransomwares are using various different methods of advanced asymmetric encryption to make sure that somebody cannot reverse engineer, even using a supercomputer, to look into what people are doing to get their asymmetric private keys back. Okay, like we've said in the past, we don't really care what somebody does on the asymmetric side. We do it on the symmetric side, which he understands that too. Okay, so I think he was just trying to be thorough on his explanation, and I'm trying to be as thorough as I can within the context of the question that I get asked. Okay. Later on, he mentions that I may be dodging, or we may be dodging a set of questions. He later potentially corrected that later on. He realized that the video response that I had put out was really a response to a podcast. It was not a response to his question. So I appreciate the fact that he's giving me that credit on that. And I like to also point out to him in the same way. So the questions that he may be asking me may just be within the context of what you see that we've posted. Okay. All right. So addressing the dodging side of it, we certainly, as everybody would understand, we certainly would not go in and describe the exact details of what we do. We have patents, patent applications, et cetera, that would have the details itself. But a lot of startups from a time go-to-market standpoint, we're trying to race to get market share. Okay, so we wouldn't be describing exactly in detail what we would do, but I wanted to address what he was suspecting that we're doing. He's asking whether we're actually doing hooking into a crypto library. We're absolutely not doing that. And we've shown that that works. The example that I want to point out again is that we work with Conti, and Conti, this is not very difficult to verify. Conti unhooks everything under the sun. Okay, you run an EDR, XDR to it, that's hooking to it, he will unhook it. Another example I like to bring out that we've had running for over 2 years now is, for example, Internet Explorer runs sometimes in protected mode. Okay, so all the newer browsers from Microsoft will also run in what's called protected mode. That technical term really comes down to, within the context that we're discussing here, it doesn't allow other applications to hook into that. Okay, so if you're looking at an EDR, XDR, very commonly they will tell and say, we were not able to look into what happened on this protected application, protected mode application, which Internet Explorer in protected mode is one of those examples. You can certainly put in the future with Microsoft Edge and many other products that come from Microsoft and other products that are not from Microsoft. You can certainly put it in protected mode and applications cannot hook into those. I'd like to point out again that not only are we now shipping ransomware, but at the same time we've shipped TLS for years now, over 100,000 installations on servers themselves that are running obviously in protected mode, and we can get the keys. And so I like to point that out as ways of showing you're making a great guess. You're very qualified to ask all these questions. You probably know more than I do on many of the aspects that we're describing, but in specifically to what Nubeva does, the claim that if somebody were to unhook what we do, we wouldn't be able to get visibility, that is not accurate. I'm hoping that I covered it exactly as the question was posed to me. I was a little surprised that a question like this, somebody didn't just reach out to us and discuss that with us. And I was more than welcome to have that discussion. Sometimes I may have read the question wrong, or maybe as I'm answering this, there were certain things that I misread as to where the questioning was going. Okay, but the notion that once we put out now that our ransomware solutions is out there, that if we become mildly popular or some level of popularity, that the ransomware people would be able to do something to address us, our situation by saying unhook what Nubeva is doing, that absolutely would not actually stop us. I'm sure there's geniuses out there that may be able to do something in the future that does not address what we do. We are doing something very, very different. Right? So we talked about addressing it from an encryption standpoint, which is really a very controlled, from a permutation standpoint, a very controlled environment of what a ransomware, malware, or anybody can do. You never hear someone say, I'm going to have a brand new encryption. Most of the time when you hear somebody came out with a brand new encryption, you'll hear that it breaks fairly quickly after that. And I think I talked about this, right? Even when the AES standard, AES is Rainbow, it's, they then call it AES because Rainbow actually then won out against other crypto encryption systems. If you review those, you'll see that some of those that were proposed later on were found to be not as secure as others. So it's very difficult to come up with their own encryption. I don't think the set of questions that were sent to us on this was talking about the potential of somebody changing the encryption. I'm addressing that of all the things that a malware ransomware could do. Certainly unhooking is not going to stop us from doing what we do. Changing the encryption would be extremely unlikely of something that they would try to do because they would remove the very thing that makes them money, okay, from that standpoint. Now, obviously, there's other ways they could make sure that we're not installed, right? So there's quite frequently in this industry, as simple as instead of saying, I want to make sure everything's uninstalled, well, they could certainly make, in some way, shape, or form, process making our customers think that they installed our product when in fact they were not able to install it on all the systems that they did. Okay, so there's a variety of ways of finding ways to get around what us in cybersecurity try to do, as I'm sure he knows. But what he presented, I'm trying to directly respond to that, is not one of them. And we are not aware of any common methods that ransomware or malware are doing today or claiming to do, or anything, frankly, that we can think of to dodge what we do today. So hopefully I've addressed that. I almost lost my breath on that. I welcome further questions. If you want to just call us, go ahead, please. And I apologize. I think the set of questions were sent to me maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I may potentially late. We decided to launch a product right around the turn of the year, new year, and that probably wasn't the best idea. But it was exciting to get the product out. And so I'm now trying to address all the questions as quickly as I can. Okay.
Well, Randy, fair enough. I feel like you did a really thorough job going through this. You and this anonymous inquisitor, who again, guys, we fully recommend go ahead and just reaching out to have a direct dialogue.
Yes,
May make the process a little bit easier. All I really got out of that, Randy, is I don't know, something unhooking, and my grade school knowledge of this technical stuff is not keeping up. But by all means, guys, keep reaching out with the questions, and we will happily answer them as they come in and as we have time. Randy, is there anything else you want to add?
No, absolutely. If there's further questions that this gentleman or anybody has, we always welcome. We like people to think about and poke holes as to what we do, because certainly, as he indicated, and we all, from a common sense standpoint, at some point or another, the malware people and the bad actors will start trying to poke holes too.
Agreed. Very well said. Anything well done has to have challenge. That's how it gets meddled. But all right, Randy, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you everyone for watching, and stay tuned for another video coming soon.